Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pada Padme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Now we come to the fifth chapter of this book, Sri Ma Sharda Devi and her divine play. So the chapter heading is Awakening of Divinity. So it begins with a wonderful quote from Chandi, which is also known as Devi Mahatmya. Evam Bhagavati Devi sa nityapi punah punah sambhuya kurute bhupah jagatah paripalanam. So though the sage rishi of this Chandi who wrote, Sage Meda says to Surat, O king, he is the king. If you know the story of Chandi, there's a king and a merchant involved in this, and the sage Medha is telling Surat, O king, the supreme goddess, although eternal, Sa Nitya Api, she is eternal. She is one with Brahman in her formless aspect. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, there is no difference between Brahman and Shakti. They are one. As Avyakta Prakriti or as unmanifest Prakriti, she is one with Brahman. But though she is eternal, the sage says to Surat, that the supreme goddess, Evam Bhagavati Devi, Sa means she, Nityapi. She is Nitya, but Punaha Sambhuya manifests herself in this world again and again for the protection of the world. So here we are referring to Prakriti or Shakti as the protectress of this whole world. She is the one who protects us. She is the one who creates. She is the one who protects. That's the idea. So we worship that same formless eternal reality known as Brahman, as Shakti, and the supreme goddess who is Nitya, who is eternal, but still she manifests herself again and again with a form, with a divine form endowed with Shakti for the protection of these worlds. So Sri Ramakrishna, the Avatara, as we call him, he was a world teacher, as Swamiji referred to him, Jagat Guru. He was a world teacher, and his first disciple was Ma Sharada. He knew perfectly well the mission that Sarada had to carry out when he was gone. So he wanted to transmit all the spiritual treasures that he had accumulated during his sadhana. That's one of the reasons why when he was doing sadhana, Sri Ma Sharda Devi was still in Jairambati. He was just waiting for her to grow up so that at an appropriate time, when he gets instructions from the Divine Mother herself, he would hand over these spiritual treasures which he had accumulated over a period of time. Many years of sadhana which he did in Dakshineshwar. He was keen to hand it over because he knew his life on this earth was limited, and Sri Ma Sharda Devi had to accomplish much more than what he did by way of initiating disciples, taking spirituality to the world. So that is the idea Sri Ramakrishna had in mind, and he knew that the treasures he had to be handed over to somebody who not only could consolidate and preserve it, but also spread it in a much more effective way. That's the idea. So when Sri Ramakrishna visited Kamarpukur, as we saw in 1867, he had begun to train Ma Sharada in various spiritual disciplines. But he could not finish the task at that time. At that time, she was just 14 years old. And moreover, he was there for a very short time. But as we observe, it was not in Sri Ramakrishna's nature to leave anything unfinished. Whatever he took up, he would finish it. Any sankalpa or resolution he made in his life, that was the hallmark of a man who is wedded to truth, a divine being who is wedded to truth, a saint who is wedded to truth. They normally, even if it is just a wish or a thought, they take it to its logical conclusion. Sri Ramakrishna's life also we observe in his biography or in the reminiscences which M has written. He says whenever Sri Ramakrishna decided that he would go and he would express the thought that I will go and worship, or I would go to the temple and have darshan of mother, he would simply get up, and no matter whom he met on the way, unless he finished his task, the sankalpa that he had made, he said, let me first finish what I have decided to do. Maybe it was a small task. Most of us would not mind just stopping on the way if we bump into somebody and talk to them. But Sri Ramakrishna was not like that. Whatever he took up, whatever task he took upon himself, he would simply fulfill it, and he would be restless until he finished that task. Once the task was over, then he was ready for anything else. So he knew that the task which he had taken upon himself, that is to train Sarada in the various spiritual disciplines which he himself had undergone under the guidance of so many gurus who came to him, he decided not to leave this world, not to give up this body before handing over the entire spiritual treasure to Sharada, who was to carry out his mission for a much more longer time than he did. So, whenever he started a spiritual practice, even when he was getting trained himself under various gurus who mysteriously came to him, he would devote himself to it completely. Whether he was following Advaita sadhana, he would be full of that spirit of Advaita. When he followed the Sufi mystic, he behaved as if he was a Muslim, and he would go to the mosque and he would do everything that a steadfast sadhaka of Islam would do. So also with Christianity. So he followed his teacher's instructions implicitly, and he would not rest until he attained success in that particular discipline. That is how we successively, that intensity of purpose, that dedication, devotion to the ideal, and more importantly, the yearning, the amount of yearning he had to fulfill to achieve success in that particular path, made him traverse those paths much more faster than even his gurus had done. For example, Tutapuri says, what I achieved in 40 years, I saw Sri Ramakrishna achieve in just 3 days. He was given initiation into the Advaitic sadhana, and within 3 days, he reached the culmination. He reached Nilvikalpa Samadhi, which, according to his own guru, took 40 years for Totapuri to achieve. Similarly, with other gurus also, they were all surprised, especially Bhairavi Brahmani, who taught him the 64 tantras, the sadhanas according to the 64 tantras, the various sects of tantras, and also Vaishnava religion. She found that he very easily mastered or reached the culmination of that sadhana within a short time, which would have taken normally years and years for ordinary sadhakas or aspirants, spiritual aspirants. So in 1872, in 1867, he had begun training Sharda, who was just 14 years old. So in 1872, she was quite mature. She was 18 years old. So Sri Ramakrishna now decided to resume her training. He also wanted to test himself. He remembered his Guru Totapuri's statement that he alone is firmly established in the knowledge of Brahman. You may have a glimpse of Brahman, but if you want to be established in the knowledge of that formless aspect, that is Advaita, then one has to keep intact the renunciation which led to this realization. It cannot be that you had intense renunciation and you reach the goal, and then once you reach the goal, you can do whatever you like. So that renunciation, detachment, discrimination, that viveka between the eternal and the non-eternal continues, and that remains throughout his life, throughout the person who has realized. So such a person alone, according to Totapuri, who was Sri Ramakrishna's guru, who taught him Advaita sadhana, he said even a Advaitin has to be firmly established in that knowledge of Brahman. It is one thing to have a glimpse of that reality, and another thing to make that reality your own by keeping intact the spirit of renunciation, the spirit of detachment, and also the spirit of discrimination between eternal and the non-eternal, and also self-awareness, even though now, unlike before, he was living with his wife. So not he had to live the life of a sannyasin even while he was living with his wife. That was the challenge, and that is what Totapuri had told him. So he alone has attained spiritual illumination, who can always look upon men and women alike as Atman and deal with them accordingly. So that is the culmination of Advaitic sadhana, that you can henceforth, after the realization, if you want to sustain or if you want to keep intact or be firmly established in the realization, then one has to keep intact the renunciation, the detachment and discrimination, and the self-awareness which led to this realization, so that it becomes your permanent companion. You become firmly established in that. But that will presuppose that the person who has attained such realization would look upon men and women not with any kind of distinction, any kind of gender bias, or any kind of discrimination between high and low, black and white. So many dualities we see in life, and we try to compare one with the other. That kind of comparison goes away, and they all look upon these realized people who have been established in Brahman, not just had a glimpse once, but they have been established because of their renunciation, detachment, and discrimination and self-awareness, that they deal with everything that they come across as Atman, the same spirit indwelling everybody. They see the same spirit. They don't see the dualities. They don't see the distinctions that normal human beings see. And we make decisions based on these likes and dislikes, based on the distinctions that we see around us. We like some people, we don't like some people. And then still, if we claim that we are Advaitins, then it is wrong. Because if one has read Advaita or studied Advaita or practiced Advaita, then he cannot be discriminative. He cannot discriminate between people. He has to see the same Atman in everybody. So Sri Ramakrishna now began to teach Sarada not only the goal of human life, but how also, while aiming at that high ideal, the lofty goal of human life, that is to be one with Brahman, or to be established in Brahman, the supreme reality. But while doing that, he also trained her, according to the biographer, how to perform the mundane household duties, the duties that a householder by Swadharma. Swadharma means everybody has a Swadharma. A sannyasin has a Swadharma. A householder has a Swadharma. A child has a Swadharma. A father has a Swadharma. So these roles may differ, but for a realized person, it really doesn't matter. He has to do the duties that come to him with the same efficiency as he would if he had any worldly goal in mind. He, in fact, he has to have a higher efficiency, because one who is established in Brahman never makes a false step. People who are ignorant can take false steps, and they may not perform their duties. Though they try their hard to be an ideal householder, they may not succeed in their pursuit. But a man of realization, if at all he or she enters a household, she has to perform the so-called ordinary household duties as perfectly or perfectly in a perfect way. So that is why yoga karmasu kaushalam, one who works with dexterity, with total control, with the total dedication and aspiration, that itself is yoga. So the yoga which one uh, uh, follows to attain the highest realization, the same yoga is used while doing all the mundane, so-called mundane activities. So Sri Ramakrishna taught her about not only about meditation, prayer, samadhi, and what knowledge of Brahman is, the different sadhanas that he did, but one unique feature of his teaching was, apart from telling things about these spiritual sadhana and its experiences, he did not restrict or limit his teaching to mere verbal instruction. He also closely watched her to see whether she was carrying out his instructions. That is the hallmark of a great teacher. The teacher is supposed not only to give instructions, but see that his instructions are followed to the last letter. That is one important thing a teacher has to do while training his disciples. While training his disciples, he normally kept them near him, and through affection, through love, he made them his very own. One day he told Srima Sharda, he says, just as there is a Bengali proverb that the uncle moon is the dear uncle of all children. When we tell stories to young children, they when they ask what is this moon, then the parents say he's the uncle moon, because he's dear, he is impartial, he's dear uncle of all the children. You, your brothers, sisters, your friends, cousins, and all the people of the world, everybody has a right to call him uncle because he is impartial. So similarly, is to say everyone has a right to call on God. Out of his grace, he reveals himself to all who call upon him. So you don't have to bother that God is partial to some and impartial and sides with some people. No, God's grace is flowing upon everybody equally. The grace is flowing, but only thing is one has to call upon him, and he reveals if you want him, you get him. That is the idea. So you have to call upon him, and you too will see him if that yearning is there. But you have to do your part. Then only he'll reveal. Unless you need him, he will not reveal himself. Though his grace is same upon all the people, he will reveal to him the most who calls upon him. So we have to do our part, and he does his part. So recalling her early days in Dakshineshwar, now Holy Mother recalls the days she spent in Dakshineshwar. She used to say on moonlit nights, I mean, much later in her life, she used to recount the experiences she had while she was new and she had come to Dakshineshwar for the first time to live with the Sri Ramakrishna. She said, on moonlit nights, I would look at the reflection of the moon in the placid water of the Ganges and piteously pray to God with tearful eyes. Oh Lord, there are stains even on the moon. You see what kind of purity she wanted um, what kind of purity she sought for her own mind. She says, my mind let it be absolutely stainless. How? There are stains even in the moon. Moon is not always white. There are certain uh, patterns that we can see on the moon. Maybe that is because of the mountains and the other things. The reflection is not even. It's not just white. There are certain gray portions in the moon. So she used to pray that even the moon has these stains, but let my mind be pure, and even let my mind not have any stain. Let it be absolutely stainless. So even the moon has stains, but let my mind. They say that in our scriptures, they say it's the waxing and the waning of the moon has a great impact on normal people, especially people with psychological problems. So, moon is supposed to be the deity who controls our mind. But one who has a stainless mind, he doesn't have anything to worry. Like the stainless or the full moon, even the moon has stains, but let my mind not have any of those stains. Let it be absolutely stainless. That was the prayer uh, she used to pray to God uh, with this wonderful prayer. So normally, the relationship of a young married couple is usually centered more on a physical plane. But throughout their lives, Sri Ramakrishna and Sharada demonstrated an ideal which you can say was a great spiritual companionship. Each tested the other to see if there was any physicality left in them. One night when Sharada went to Sri Ramakrishna's room to sleep, he said to her, please tell me, when she used to sleep in the same room, later on she shifted to Nabat, but when she was not well, sometimes Sri Ramakrishna felt that she should sleep in the same room and even employed a woman to look after her in case she needs any help at night. So one day she came to his room and Sri Ramakrishna tested her by saying, tell me if you have come here to drag me down the road leading to worldly life. Have you come here? All these days I was alone, I was practicing spirituality. Is your intention, please tell me if your intention is to drag me down to a worldly life, as mostly married couple are uh, expected to do. Certainly not, Sri Sharda replied without a moment's hesitation. Why should I drag you into the world? I have come here only to help you realize your spiritual ideal. So that was the immediate answer she gave. Said, far from dragging you down, I have come here, in fact, to look after your spiritual, to look after you in such a way that it it helps you in realizing your spiritual ideal, in whichever way it is, whether it is in sadhana or whether it is in handing over the spiritual tradition or the reins of the spiritual uh, movement that he had created to Ma Sharda. So in any case, she had come here to fulfill or to complete the mission on a mission which he had taken upon himself to spiritualize the entire humanity. Even sometimes Sarada also challenged Sri Ramakrishna. They tested each other in the beginning, or maybe they just wanted to know what the other partner thinks about uh, them. So one day she asked him as she was massaging his feet, how do you regard me? She was asking a very important question. How do you look upon me now that we are married to each other? How do you look upon me? So immediately replied by pointing to himself and saying, the mother who is worshipped in the temple, that is Ma Bhavatarni, whom he worshipped throughout his life, and the mother who gave birth to this, he always used to refer to his body by saying this, means as a third person, that this is something which I have, but I am not that body. The body belongs to me. So this is just as I have a room, I have a cot, I have a body. So he used to always use this language. He used to always see point and say this. This means this body. He would never say me or mine. That ego had gone. He always felt that this was just a puppet. Mother was running it and the body was no exception. So he said, the mother who gave birth to this biological body, pointing to his own body, and I see no difference, because the same mother has inspired this great drama or the divine play. She is the one who is worshipped in the same mother who is worshipped in the temple, the mother who gave birth to this body and is now living in the Nahabat. She was living in the Nahabat where Holy Mother is to stay. The same mother is now stroking my feet. So Holy Mother was just stroking his feet. So she said, it's the same mother of the universe. Really and truly, I always regard you as the embodiment of the blissful mother of the universe. So the blissful mother of the universe, whom he worshipped throughout his life, was seen by him in every manifestation around him. That kept his mind on a very high plane. The master's experience, Sri Ramakrishna's experience, the author says, the biographer says, is supported by the scriptures. The scriptures say, O goddess, that is again Chandi, O goddess, you are the embodiment of knowledge. You are manifest in the higher and lower forms of conceptual knowledge. The higher form is Paravidya, the lower form is Aparavidya. There are two forms of knowledge. One is the higher knowledge, which gives you the ideas of higher reality of the spirit, the spiritual knowledge. And the lower knowledge is that which enables you to negotiate, to live in this world. So lower forms of conceptual knowledge is what mother is. So also she is the embodiment of higher knowledge. You are manifest in both the higher and lower forms, para and apara. You are embodied in every woman in the world. O Mother, you alone are present everywhere in the universe, pervading everything. You are incomparable and beyond expression. Who can describe your infinite glories by singing hymns? This is the 11th chapter of the Chandi, where this verse occurs, that this goddess whom we are worshipping is the embodiment of knowledge, both higher and lower conceptual knowledge or intellectual knowledge. She is embodied in every woman being, in fact, in everything in this universe. O Mother, you are incomparable. That's why we can't compare you with any other limited person. You are infinite. Who can describe your infinite glories? That is how the hymn goes in the Chandi. So Sri Ramakrishna, we know, was firmly established in truth. So he decided to use his relationship with his wife to test his purity and spiritual integrity. He just wanted to see, is it just something I just express verbally? When I say I see the same Divine Mother in everybody, am I true to myself? Am I a hypocrite? So he was, just as he would be very strict with his disciples, he was very strict with himself. A person who is strict with himself can be strict with his disciples. So he said, Swami Shardanandji describes the master's deliberations. One night, as he watched Sharda lying asleep beside him, the master began to discriminate in his own mind. This is how a worldly person would have a biological relationship with his wife. But that day he thought, is my mind pure enough, or is my mind spiritual enough to resist the temptation? And he asked his own mind. That means he was watching his own mind, how it would react. He said, he started telling this, that, oh my mind, this is the body of a woman. Men look upon it as an object of great enjoyment, and they always lust after it. All through the world we see the body of a woman from the point of view of a man, and vice versa, is looked upon as an object of enjoyment. So everybody, that Kamini Kanchan, as they say, the lust is one of the main forces that create this world. They create this worldliness in a human being. But if that lust once possesses this body and one remains confined within the flesh, then one can't realize God. So Sri Ramakrishna decided to test himself and said, if this mind has the least tinge of materiality, or if it yearns after the physical body, or if the mind remains confined within the flesh, as it was not the case. He very clearly used to feel that this body is something different than him. So he just wanted to test whether it was firmly established. He was firmly established in the higher reality and not having anything to do with the body, the flesh. So he knew that if that least tinge of attachment to the body is there, then one cannot realize the spirit. So he told his mind, "Oh mind, let there be no hypocrisy or theft in your mind. You just don't have one idea in your mind. You express something and you do something else. No, be frank. Don't be thinking one thing inwardly and pretending another outwardly. Be frank. Do you want this woman's body or do you want God? You have to choose now." As I said, the whole thing lies in the power of choice, the right choices that we make. So Sri Ramakrishna was no exception. As a sadhaka, as a person who has shown the way to infinite aspirants, he says you have to be frank. You have to ask yourself the question, do you want this? You can't have both. This is the woman's body, or do you want God? If you want the body, here it is in front of you. You can enjoy it. So this is how the discrimination process took place. These were expressed by Sri Ramakrishna to his own disciples. And the master was about to touch Sarada's body when the moment he was physically also incapable of taking such a step. His mind was always used to soar to the highest plane. So the moment he got that thought, and you just test yourself, and he was about to touch the body, his mind suddenly recoiled and lost itself so deep in samadhi that he did not regain normal consciousness that night. That night he could not come back to his bodily consciousness. So much was he absorbed in God, or in the reality which is known as spirit, the pure spiritual reality. The next morning, throughout the night, he could not bring the mind down to the physical plane. So it was impossible for him to pretend or to even be hypocritical about his intentions. So the next morning, after considerable difficulty, he was forced to bring back the mind to the conscious plane. When somebody came, those who knew, they repeated the Lord's name. That was the way he could be brought down. He was immersed in samadhi for the whole night. Leave alone touching the body, he could not even look, come to the conscious plane. He was full of immersed in that spiritual consciousness. So with great difficulty, and he had been telling his disciples that whenever you find me in samadhi and unable to come down to the normal plane, they had to repeat the name of the Lord, and so that the God with form. You see, to bring him to the world with form, you had to repeat something which emphasizes the aspect of God with form. Say Krishna, Rama, all these mantras, they represent certain forms. So when you repeat the name, the association with form comes automatically in the mind, and his mind comes down. So to bring him down from the formless to the world with form, then you have to utter the name, because he is not in a condition to see anything, because he is in a totally different world. So the first thing that people do to bring people from the formless to the form is name. That is one more argument in favor of the mantra shastra. The mantras, why do we utter the name. We utter the name because sound comes first. The visual form of the Lord comes later. So, in Sri Ramakrishna's case, we can see this experiment. He had to loudly shouting the name of his Ishta, whatever mantras he had told his disciples, they would go and repeat that name loudly enough so that the got uh, hearing is one of the ways to bring the form in mind. So the name and the form of the Lord, they are intimately connected. Nam and Nami Abhed. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you don't bother what that name represents. The mantra is so secret. If the mantra is the right mantra, given by the right person, and one has received it in a tradition, then it has to represent the Lord, whose representation that mantra is. So when the mantra was repeated in his, Lord's name was repeated in his ear, he came down from samadhi, and then he could see the other forms in the world, because they are part and parcel of the God with form. The Ishvara, the God with form, and Brahman, the God without form, they are connected by this name. Name is one thing which connects the formless to the form, That is why Tulsidas, in his famous verse, he said, uh, the name acts as a matchmaker between the formless Brahman and uh, the form which is Shakti. So to make a match, you need a matchmaker. So he beautifully says in his one of his famous Ramcharitmanas that the mantra or the name of the Lord is the one who brings about this connection. So one had to repeat the Lord's name loudly in Sri Ramakrishna's ear so that he came back to the world of form. So the moment he was about to touch the biological body of his wife, he wanted to test. In fact, he didn't want to touch, he just wanted to see whether he is really beyond form. The moment that thought come, the mind automatically, spontaneously rose to a spiritual plane where all distinction of form vanished. So that is how he transcended the need for, transcended the worldly life. So the gross material and the subtle worldly life, there is no solution while we still remain within. We have to transcend it. That is how Sri Ramakrishna show. And the way to do it is through repeating the name. In Sri Ramakrishna's case, the opposite took place. I mean, the reverse process took place. We had to repeat the name to bring him down. And if we follow the same process, we repeat the name to take our mind and make it ascend to higher planes. So it is the same process. In case of people whose mind is by nature goes to a very high plane and tends to remain there. Japa is something which brings them down. But a person whose mind is always attached to the gross, the japa helps him to raise the mind. So it is like a connector. So it connects one to a higher formless aspect of divinity or God with form, so that you reduce your connection with the form that you see around you. And in that way, you become spiritual. What to become spiritual is to replace the forms that we see around us, the forms that are troubling us, the forms that we get involved in, the forms that make us miserable, the forms when they vanish, the forms that we like, and when they vanish, they make us unhappy, and the forms that we don't like and contact with them makes us unhappy. There are two things. The forms that we like, when they go, they make us sad. The forms that we don't like, when we encounter them, even that makes us sad. So in either case, these forms are responsible for misery. So why go after these forms which are temporary? Go after the formless. So how to do it? By repeating the name. By repeating the name of the Lord, one transcends. One cannot solve the problem at the gross level. One can just transcend them as Sri Ramakrishna did. So this whole night is spent in that high plane. So during the prime of her youth, it is said that Sarada slept in a bed next to her husband for nearly 8 months. She stayed in the same room. Her mind, like her own husband's, constantly soared to a higher plane. And she herself said she had never any desire, not even a single thought for physical pleasure. At least Sri Ramakrishna, they say, mother is more purer than Sri Ramakrishna, because in Ramakrishna's mind, at least he wanted to test whether he was really whether he really had transcended the senses. Whereas in Holy Mother's case, she had absolutely not a single thought or in this direction. Such a high, such events or such a absolute purity are unheard of in the lives of other great religious teachers. Many of the avatars before, they even had children, but after a certain uh, time, they realize the valuelessness of that and then they renounce the world. We know Buddha himself had a child, but this innate purity of Holy Mother, who was to play a much bigger role than Ramakrishna himself in the spiritual mission that he had started. So such events are unheard of, and this in later years, Sri Ramakrishna referred to this innate purity of his wife, Sri Sharda. He said to a disciple once, if she had not been so pure, and if she had not lost her self-control and made demands on me, who knows, perhaps my self-control would have given way. Perhaps I would have come down to the physical plane. After I married, Sri Ramakrishna says, I implored the Divine Mother, O Mother, please eradicate lust completely from my wife's mind. While living with her at that time, for these 8 months, he realized that the mother had truly granted my prayer. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna told one of his disciples that I was thinking that if she doesn't have enough self control and she loses her purity, then what will happen to me? So he implored and prayed to the Divine Mother, please remove the least tinge of lust from my wife's mind. And that is what happened. So he says, my mother had listened to my prayer. That is why I found that she was full of self control and it never disturbed his sadhana and his uh, spiritual companionship with her. So it is so wonderful to hear this human play of divine beings in this world. It's a human play. It's a play in which they have assumed physical bodies for our sake. Their minds may dwell in transcendental plane. If they always lived in transcendental plane, then we would perhaps remark, what is the use? If we had samadhi, we also would have been like that. But they behave like the rest of us, um, show that they are also can succumb to temptation sometimes. And how they struggle, that struggle inspires normal human beings. So all these the divine play that was going on was to show how the minds could be taken to a transcendental plane. So it is said that after he took sannyas from Totapuri. He has to look at women as daughters, sisters, or mothers, but never as wives. So Sri Ramakrishna, though he had a wife, it was not possible for him, because he had taken sannyasa, to maintain any kind of worldly relationship with her, even otherwise. Apart from the limitations of the flesh, he had already taken sannyasa, so he it was impossible for him to keep any kind of worldly relationship with her. For him, all women were manifestations of the Divine Mother, and he never deviated from this attitude all through his life. So after repeated tests, Sri Ramakrishna became convinced of Ma Sharada's absolute purity. Now, once he was, this is also part of the divine play of both Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Ma Sharada, that now he decided to hand over the spiritual power, because it requires a pure soul or a pure person, a pure this aspirant, to transfer that power fully. If there is some kind of impurity, then one does not really benefit. So purity and renunciation are two wings of spiritual life. They both purity as well as renunciation. They help the spiritual aspirants reach their destination. That is why Christ says in the Bible, blessed in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So there was no compromise as far as purity is concerned. So Christ very clearly says that if you want to see God, you have to be blessed by being pure in heart. You have to attain to that purity before one can even think of seeing God. So that is what the Bible says, that is what all the scriptures say. So now we are preparing, the stage was prepared for the Shodashi Puja, because according to the Tantra, the Divine Mother has 10 forms. If you read the books on Tantra, they are the names. I'll just read out to you. Kali, Tara, Shodashi, Bhuvaneshwari, Bhairavi, Chinnamasta, Dhumavati, Bagala, Matangi and Kamala. Shodashi means these 10 forms. Shodashi is also called as Rajrajeshwari and Tripura Sundari according to the Lalita Sahasranama. That's another hymn on the Divine Mother. Shodashi, among all these forms, Shodashi is the most benign and purest form of the Divine Mother. Not that others are impure, but they have different functions to perform. The pure sattvic aspect is Shodashi. So we have Kali, Tara, Shodashi, Bhuvaneshwari, Bhairavi, Chinnamasta, Dhumavati, Bagla, Matangi and Kamala. They have, Kali also does something. She has a role to play in this world. But Shodashi is supposed to be the purest sattvic form of Divine Mother. So one can worship this deity in a clay image. Normally, there are different rituals to perform puja. There is a different ritual to perform Kali Puja. There's a different ritual to perform puja of Tara. There is a Tara Peeth in Bengal. Then Bhuvaneshwari, that is what Bhuvaneshwari was worshipped in Dakshineshwar. So like that, there are other Bagala. These are the different aspects of Shakti. And to worship Shodashi, one can either do it in a clay image of Shodashi, or one can worship a young girl who is about the age of 16. Shodasha means 16. So according to Narada Pancharatra, which is a book on Tantra, it's a Vaishnava Tantra. One day, according to that story of Narada Pancharatra, that is what Narada Pancharatra gives an account of sadhana according to the Shaktas and also the Vaishnavas. Narada was, contrary to popular belief, he was not just a follower of Vishnu. He also is authored this Pancharatra. That's why it's known as Narada Pancharatra. In that story, one day, Ma Kali became mad at Shiva and took the form of Shodashi. That is how the myth goes. Literally, it means a 16-year-old girl and a paragon of beauty. The Divine Mother takes various forms according to the time and situation. Creation, preservation, and destruction are all her play. So she can take any form. When killing demons, she takes a destructive form, but she assumes a benign form like Shodashi for her devotees. So on 5th June, we'll find the night of 1872, that is the date. On 5th June 1872, it was the night of Falaharani Kali Puja, that is the auspicious day. Sri Ramakrishna worshipped Shodashi. In 1872, it was 5th June. The dates keep on changing. So it is known as Falaharani Kali Puja, which is worshipped as Shodashi. There are many Kali Pujas, which there's one Kali Puja after the Durga Puja, that is also known as Diwali. The day before Diwali, the Kali Puja is performed, and next day it's celebrated as Diwali. It depends on the different traditions of different parts of India. So Sri Ramakrishna worshipped Shodashi, which is the third form of the Divine Mother. Kali, Tara, Shodashi, Bhuvaneshwari, fourth. And he began his sadhana by worshipping Adya Shakti, or the primordial power, in the image of Bhavatarani Kali of Dakshineshwar. Finally, He had begun his sadhana by worshipping the first form, Kali, and then he decided to worship the third aspect of Mother, the third form of Divine Mother, which is known as Shodashi. So finally, on that new moon night, it's a new moon night that is known as Amavasya. In 1872, on 5th June, as I said, he worshipped the same Adya Shakti in the living form of Sharada. As it is said in the scriptures, you can worship a clay image or you can worship a young girl or woman who was around that age. So we see Srima Sharada Devi was almost 16, a little more than 16. So he worshipped that Adya Shakti in the living form of Sharada. Thus, that is the culmination of his sadhana. He completed or culminated his sadhana by offering the results of all his previous sadhana at the feet of Holy Mother. This important event, we will discuss about the details later in the next class. That important event awakened the divinity in Srima Sharada Devi and manifested his own spiritual relationship with Sharada and made clear the role that she would play in the future. By performing the Shodashi Puja, Sri Ramakrishna signified that Adya Shakti herself, the Divine Mother herself, has taken the form as Sri Sharada Devi. So when Sharada Devi was worshipped as Shodashi, she was just 18 years old, in the prime of her youth. The scriptures do not require that the girl who participates in this worship, who is worshipped in fact, must be exactly 16, but she should be of that age roughly. So there is a mantra after which we'll discuss this in the next class, how the Shodashi Puja took place and how we worshipped his spiritual consort, which is a rare event in the history of the world. Anybody worshipping his own wife as the Divine Mother. The mantra, that meditation mantra on Shodashi, is the form of Shodashi, who is the beloved of Shiva, is crimson like the rising sun. She has 4 arms and 3 eyes, and she holds weapons, noose, gourd, arrows, and bow in her 4 hands. So that is the symbology. If you have to worship a clay image or a metal image, you can worship. But if you want to worship, you can worship a living being who is around 16 or 18 years old. So we'll conclude and see if there are some questions and continue the next class. Yeah. Is that Thakur's verbal articulation of Srima's relationship to him raised her and facilitated her realization of the knowledge of her true identity? Yeah, it is not just a verbal articulation. It is also the prayer that, as we saw in later on, that Sri Ramakrishna himself says he went and prayed. Whenever he prayed with so much intensity that all his prayers were fulfilled. So it's not just the verbal assertion, but his prayers, the subtle prayers, which every one of us has to use if we want to benefit ourselves spiritually. It is the subtle prayers of Sri Ramakrishna when he went and prayed and asking the Divine Mother not to tempt him, not to tempt him or tempt Holy Mother, who had taken a human form, so that she doesn't fall a prey to the human nature, which gravitate towards the body. So to prevent that, he prayed, and he believed that the prayer was answered when Mother's mind was raised. The young 18-year-old girl who had come from Jairambati to live with her husband, she spent about 8 months in almost the same room as Sri Ramakrishna, but they never had any kind of physical contact. So that was a result of the prayer he did, and so also the innate purity of Holy Mother. So it's not just the verbal communication. Verbally, of course, asked her whether she has come to drag him down to lead a worldly life. He would just wanted to test her by giving C. What does she answer? She said no. She was absolutely, she had no doubt about her role. So she said, I have just, why should I come to drag you here? I have not come all the way to do that. I've come just to help you in your spiritual quest and fulfill your spiritual mission. So that assured her. But as Sri Ramakrishna himself said, he had prayed for that. He had prayed to the Divine Mother so that she overcomes the limitations which normally human beings succumb to. And when the grace of the Divine Mother is there, you can overcome these limitations which drag you down to the world. That is the main message here. So if there are any more questions, otherwise I'll take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.